Good evening. Welcome. It's Erickson here, News Talk WSB, the nation's most listened to news talk station. You're stuck with me for drive time when all of us would rather be elsewhere with this amazing weather that's here before storms come. And guess what? More cold weather is coming. I kid you not. Only in the South, sunburn one day, frostbite the next. Welcome back. The phone number, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. We have been interviewing each of the Republican Senate candidates running in this year's election, allowing them to introduce themselves to the listeners of the show, exploring with them their positions. And one of the guys I've been interested to meet, because I honestly know nothing about him, and I know everyone running in the race other than David Perdue, and so I'm delighted he's able to join us today. David, how are you?
Fine, Eric. Thank you for the courtesy. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, honestly, I know all of the candidates in the race. I'm friends with some in the race. I don't know a lot about you other than generally your biography, and so I'm glad you're here and just want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody listening about yourself.
Well, that'd be great. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about who I am. I mean, I was born in Macon and then raised in Warner Robins. My mother and father were teachers. My father later in his career became the superintendent of schools in Houston County. I then worked my way through Georgia Tech, although I'm learning how to say go dogs, believe it or not. But I got an engineering degree and started working in the corporate world with a company called Kurt Salmon Associates, where we helped small businesses. My first few clients were right here in the state, as a matter of fact, in Eastman and Cochran and Moultrie with Riverside Manufacturing. And then later in my career, I was asked to go to Asia and live in Hong Kong to open up Sara Lee's first corporate headquarters in Asia. And today it's a thriving part of their business. So we lived over in Hong Kong for a while, and I'd worked in Asia a good part of my career. Prior to that, we'd actually lived in France as well. And in Hong Kong, we actually moved our two teenage boys, young teenagers over there, and it was an eye-opening experience, I can tell you. But then I became later president and CEO of the Reebok brand, the sports brand, and was asked to be part of a team to try to enact a turnaround, and we did, largely on the back of getting the first ever exclusive deal with the NFL and NBA, and then later the NHL, where effectively the other brands like Nike and Adidas were blocked out of those leagues. They just got back in last year. And then I finished my career as chairman and CEO of Dollar General, another turnaround. I was part of a great team there with a fantastic mission. It was a beautiful company, still is a great company with a great mission of helping families get from payday to payday. And once we sold that business, I then co-founded a little small business here in Georgia, and we export American-made products to third world countries, emerging markets, and so forth. And we just bought a trucking company last year. My wife and I have been married for 42 years. We met in elementary school, and we've had a great life. I just felt convicted that we had to have an alternative in this race, Eric. And I
was going to ask, well, why are you running for the Senate of all things?
Well, there are three questions that, are important when you look at me as a new candidate. Number one, I've never been a politician. I've spent the last 41 years in understanding the free enterprise system and struggling out there with everybody else to make a living in our capitalism and our free enterprise system. But what I saw is a couple things. Number one, let me talk about the party to start with. The party has lost the high ground, frankly, on its fundamental principles the precepts upon which we are founded, I think, and that is economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, and limited government. And, when the Republicans were in charge back in the early 2000s, we sort of lost the high ground on all of those, and we're paying the price today. I mean, since 2000, we've added $11 trillion to our debt. We have $17 trillion in our debt, and that's not even the big issue. The 800-pound gorilla, Eric, is this $86 trillion is one estimate. I've seen them as high as 100.
Right.
$86 trillion of future unfunded liabilities coming at us like a freight train related to Social Security, Medicare, and pension and benefits for federal employees.
Hey, David, I gotta pause you right there. We got to step out and check traffic real quick. Hang on one second. David, you raise an issue on this, and let me just throw this one at you, because some of your opponents out there, but because largely you, unlike the other opponents, you don't have a political record, so frankly, that they can throw things at you that may or may not be true. Can you have no record for which to either defend yourself or what have you? They're saying you talk like a CEO who's willing to raise taxes to solve these problems.
Well, I don't know where that comes from. That certainly shows that they don't know me at all. I mean, the last thing you'd want to do in this economy where 1 in 5 Americans are either unemployed or underemployed, and last year, 80% of the jobs we created on their watch, by the way, are part-time jobs. I mean, that's not the America that we all were raised in. This is the first generation, Eric, that has to tell our kids that we're leaving them a country worse off than we found it. And, my main thing right now is to break the logjam in Congress, this gridlock that we've had since 2000 between the Democrats wanting tax increase, Republicans wanting spending cuts. We're not getting anywhere with it. And frankly, when you understand that there are only about 10 people in the United States Senate who have any business experience, you understand how these arcane rules come out that just hinder small businesses, hinder businesses from growing economically. And when you look at that, I felt like that we had to have somebody up there that had a business background. So the way to break this gridlock is to bring the economy, the $16 trillion economy, into the debate like we did back in the 80s and like Georgia's done here in the last 10 years. Get the economy growing. Great things happen when you get that done.
Well, let me ask you on a different angle, because I'm with you. Spending is the biggest issue right now, and the federal debt. I think people pay so much attention to the deficit and don't distinguish between the two, and the debt's a big issue. I got what I said yesterday that I was going to have you on today. I've been flooded with conservative activists who are upset with you over your statements to the Marietta Daily Journal the other day, or I guess up in Cobb County, about Common Core, and right. I don't want to ambush you with any questions. I just want you to be able to state your position so people can hear it for yourself instead of a reporter.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to clear the air on that, quite frankly, because this is a common belief of mine, frankly. My mother and father were teachers, and we were in a federally impacted area at Robbins because of Robbins Air Force Base, and a lot of the money that they used in that school system had to be federal money, and because of that, we got the strings attached. So back in the 60s and 70s, I remember my dad having to fight tooth and nail against overbearing, overreaching control from the federal government. So local control has been part of my dinner conversation since I was 6 or 7 years old. I believe we should have a set of unbiased standards, but what happened in Common Core, the original intent, like so many things, got convoluted when the federal government got involved and started trying to dictate what happens at the local level. I believe very strongly that the best decisions with regard to our kids' educations has to do with the parent, the teacher, the school principal, and the administrator in that local community. Look, let me tell you something. The last 30 years, we've proven one thing. We can throw money at it from the federal government. It doesn't help our education situation. Our 14-year-olds today are way behind the world in general, in the 25th to 30 range in ranking in math and science. We're not graduating probably around 30% of our kids right now. So the current system is broken. We've got to get back to local control. But I want to clear the air. I think Common Core is definitely overreaching right now and should be abandoned in its current form.
Well, I think people will be reassured to hear that. I want to ask you something, a personal statement I've wondered about. Sorry, suddenly my cell phone is ringing from Ohio. One of your opponents has commented to me a while back that his impression of you at some of these events where you've been is that you were somewhat standoffish. Well, they're all natural politicians. And he commented again recently to me in a conversation that you've suddenly, it's like you found your footing, and you seem to be more, I hate to say, and I don't mean it in a bad way, more politician, but you're willing to glad hand more than this guy. You had the impression you were a while back. One of the issues there, I think, comes to likability of candidates, and we tend to vote for people we like. And this is the one I've wanted to ask you, and it is a totally personal question. How does a guy who lives in the gated community of a gated community down in Sea Island, which, by the way, I adore it down there, but how are you going to relate to the common people in Eastman or Colquitt County or where have you?
Well, it's something I've done my whole life, Eric. I mean, I wasn't born in the corner office. My mom and dad were teachers. I grew up working on our family farms. I know what it's like to be up every morning at 3:30 helping my uncles in his dairy farm. I know what it's like to raise watermelons and to plow soybeans. So I didn't start out in the corner office. And frankly, I'm not embarrassed by my success. That's part of what America's all about. Good. I worked my way through Georgia Tech. I worked construction. I worked warehouse jobs. The part about being standoffish is partly, I think, due to my inexperience as a politician. Yeah. I am normally shy. I don't do good cocktail parties, and I don't pander. Somebody asks me a question, I give them a straight answer, Eric, and sometimes that's misinterpreted. And frankly, I think it's a breath of fresh air when people get right to the topic, and that's why I got in this race. Frankly, is to bring the dialogue up a level and stop the conversation around the confusing not side issues, but the noise around the crisis that we have right now in this financial situation we've got, with the debt being about $1 million per household is the size of this liability. And then to start talking about how to get a solution going. I hear the same answers I've heard for the last 20 years, frankly, and they're not working. And, that's part of why I got in here. But I am not at all concerned about relating to the typical Georgian. But I am a typical Georgian.
Well, you know how to plow a soybean field. I don't.
Well, that's only part of it. But, at Dollar General, I was chairman CEO. I had the corner office. And yet that turnaround was based on talking to consumers in their kitchens about the size of the bleach that they were buying. It was turned around was based on talking to store manager about why they were leaving the company, why turnover was so high before I got there. And we cut that by probably 75% turnover or more, based on the fact that we listened to their problems. I mean, in business, you have to relate to your customers, your employees, your investors, your bondholders, your analysts. You've got to be able to relate, or you won't be successful. And my track record is not perfect, but I guarantee you it's very successful.
Well, David, look, I appreciate you stopping by. I hope to have more conversations on the air with you and all the other candidates. And it sounds like one of your biggest hang-ups, of course, is going to be learning to say "go dogs" and get down to some of the black and gold. But you'll get my father-in-law's vote just by having gone to Tech. So.
Well, I can do the "go dogs," but the barking is still yet to come. I'll tell you, Eric.
Well, don't try that one.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for allowing me to visit.
Absolutely, everybody. David Perdue, thanks for joining us.
WSB's Erick Erickson.
Erick Erickson.
He's